Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Whisper Zone. I am your storyteller, and I'm here to guide you tonight. I know many of you use these videos to drift off to sleep, so before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. I'm always curious. Where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, find your cozy spot and relax. The mountains were already quiet by the time the snow started to fall. It came down slow at first, soft flakes, drifting like feathers, covering the evergreens and trail signs in a gentle white coat. Then, as the hours passed, the wind began to pick up. What was peaceful turned sharp, the air colder than it had any right to be in March. By noon, the trails had disappeared under a thick, blowing blanket of snow. Trees swayed and creaked like old ships at sea. The world narrowed to a few feet of visibility. Even the crows had gone silent. Harold Beck stood on the cabin porch, chewing on the edge of his wool glove, scanning the forest. Behind him, the radio. Inside, the log shelter crackled with nothing but empty static. The sky was gray, not just cloudy, but heavy and low, pressing down on the world like a lid. And the fog. The fog had a mind of its own. It moved through the trees in long, slow fingers, curling and sinking, wrapping itself around the branches like it wanted to listen. They weren't supposed to be here this long. The plan was a 2-day patrol, standard snow tracking and back by Monday. But the March storm came earlier than the weather reports warned. Now they were snowed in, radios down, too far out for backup. A few birds had been chirping this morning, but now nothing, not even the wind anymore, just cold, still air, and the fog, thicker now, rolling in faster. Harold pulled his parka tight and stepped inside the shelter, slamming the door against a sudden gust. Miguel, the rookie, looked up from where he was kneeling by the fire, warming his hands. "You feel that?" Miguel asked. Harold didn't answer right away. He walked over to the stove, checked the kettle, and finally muttered, "Yeah, it's too quiet out there." Miguel gave a nervous laugh. "What, like horror movie quiet?" Harold didn't smile. Harold Beck had been in the mountains longer than most of the roads that cut through them. He didn't talk about the war much, but the faded tattoo on his forearm, a black eagle with its wings chipped by time, told you where he'd been. Korea, winter patrols. Frozen nights, buried comrades. That part of his life stayed behind his eyes. After the war, he came home to Tennessee and found peace in the wild. He liked the quiet, the patterns of animal tracks, the silence between snowfall and sunrise. It made sense to him. Out here, you knew your place. The rules were simple: stay warm, stay alert, and don't turn your back on the trees. Miguel was new, 24, bright, chatty, always asking questions. Born in El Paso, raised on sand and sun. This was his first real snow. He'd been talking about a girl back home, about maybe transferring to a park closer to Texas. Harold didn't mind him. The kid had good instincts, but right now, Miguel was rubbing his hands together like he'd just seen a ghost. "You ever get storms like this before?" Miguel asked, tossing another log into the stove. Harold sat down at the small wooden table, pulled out his field journal, and began to write. The time, weather, wind speed, visibility. He paused, then added, "Whispers in the woods, trees. Too still. Feels off." He didn't like writing things like that, but when something didn't sit right, it was better to document it. Miguel watched him write. "That's not the usual ranger log, huh?" Harold didn't look up. "Neither is this storm." He pulled the dog tag from under his sweater, just for a second, rubbed it between his fingers, then tucked it back in. The habit helped when the air felt like this. Miguel glanced out the window. "You believe in all that old Cherokee stuff? Spirits in the fog and monsters in the trees?" Harold tapped his pencil twice on the notebook and said calmly, "I believe in being prepared." That night the wind stopped. No howling, no creaking branches, just stillness. Miguel sat near the fire, head nodding as sleep pulled at his eyelids. Harold stayed up, sharpening his old hunting knife out of habit. He had a feeling, the kind that crept into your gut and settled there, cold and certain. And just before the last log popped in the fire, he heard it. A knock, not on the door, on the window. 3 slow taps, right by the far bunk. But when Harold moved to check, there was no one there. Just fog, pressed against the glass like a sheet of white skin. The next morning, the world had gone white. Not snow. Fog. It was thick, thicker than it had any right to be. You could step off the porch and your boots would vanish from sight. Trees just a few yards away looked like ghosts with bark. The sky wasn't even sky anymore, just a flat sheet of gray. Harold woke first. He always did. Miguel was still asleep, wrapped tight in his bag. The fire was dying down, the air sharp with cold. Harold layered up, took his knife and field bag and stepped outside to check the generator. The silence hit him first. No wind, no birds, no sound of trees moving. Even his boots sounded wrong on the snow, like the crunch had been swallowed up. The generator looked fine, still running, but there were prints in the snow behind it. Not boot prints, bare feet, huge. At least 15 inches long, maybe more. Toes spread wide, deep, and they led toward the cabin, not away. Harold followed them around the structure. His breath slowed, one hand on his knife. The prints circled the cabin once and then disappeared back into the fog. There were no drag marks, no signs of something falling or crawling. Just clean, deliberate steps. When he came back in, Miguel was awake, rubbing his eyes. "You all right?" Harold didn't answer. He went straight to the window. "Miguel," he said after a long pause, "did you go out last night?" Miguel blinked. "What? No. Why?" Harold didn't respond. He just kept staring into the white. Later that afternoon, it started again. The knocking. Not always at the same spot. Sometimes the back window, sometimes on the roof, sometimes on the door. Harold opened it once, just fog, but when he stepped out, something crunched under his boot. A bird, frozen solid like it had been dipped in liquid nitrogen. Its wings were spread, but one was missing, torn at the shoulder. Harold picked it up gently. "Not the cold," he muttered. This was taken. That night, Miguel couldn't sleep. The wind had returned, but only in bursts, like it was breathing. And somewhere inside that wind, they both heard it. A voice. Faint, carrying through the trees. "Harold!" Miguel sat bolt upright. "Did you hear that?" Harold was already standing, knife in hand. Breathing slow and heavy, he nodded. The voice came again the next night, but this time it didn't whisper from the trees. It came from just outside the cabin. "Miguel." Clear. Soft. "Wrong." Miguel froze. "That's my sister's voice." Harold didn't answer. He was holding the shotgun now. Not that he expected it to help. He'd seen animals hit center mass and keep walking when they weren't supposed to. Some things didn't care about bullets. "Don't open the door," Harold said firmly. Miguel stepped toward it anyway, like in a trance. The voice came again, pleading now. "Miggs, it's me. Please open the door." Harold grabbed his arm. "She's not out there." Miguel blinked like coming out of a dream. He backed away slowly. Then something scraped across the roof. Hard, like claws. The fire flickered. The walls creaked. Something heavy stepped on the porch. Slow, deliberate. One step, then another. Then silence. Harold raised the gun. "Stay behind." The door creaked as pressure pushed against it. Not a slam. Just a lean like someone testing the wood. And then came the worst sound of all. Laughter. But it wasn't real laughter. It was trying to sound like laughter. Like someone who'd never heard a human do it before was trying to copy it. Low, choppy, broken. "Ha, ha, ha," Harold whispered. "That ain't a bear." Suddenly, all the windows shattered at once. Fog rushed in, so cold it burned their lungs. The fire died instantly, as if someone had stomped it out, and standing in the doorway, or what was left of it, was something tall, at least 7 feet. Maybe more. Antlers scraped the broken wood above the frame. Its skin was gray-blue, stretched too tight across long limbs. Eyes white and shining like they reflected light that wasn't there. No pupils, no warmth. Its face, almost human but wrong, like a mask made from someone's skin. Its mouth opened wide, and it spoke, but it wasn't words. It was Miguel's voice, pleading for help. Then Harold's, then laughter again, then static. The shotgun went off. The creature didn't flinch, it vanished, like smoke sucked out of the room. The fog rushed in harder. Harold dropped the gun and then the silence returned. Miguel turned to him, eyes wide. What the hell is it? Harold didn't blink. It's a Wendigo. Harold didn't sleep. He sat by the wall with the shotgun across his lap, even though he'd seen it do nothing. Miguel tried to patch the windows with blankets, but the cold still leaked in like it was alive. Outside, the fog pressed against the glass, curling at the edges like smoke. It didn't just hang in the air now. It moved. It watched. By sunrise, visibility was down to arm's length. The trail was gone, their map was useless. Even the trees looked different, bent wrong, leaning like they were trying to get away. We should go, Miguel whispered. Find a ranger station or something. Harold didn't move. That thing's hunting, it's not going to let us walk out. But by mid-afternoon, with food low and the cold getting worse, they made a decision. Leave. Together. Harold packed salt, flares, his knife, and the shotgun. Miguel tucked a small photo of his family into his chest pocket. They didn't speak much. The only sound was snow under boots, and somewhere distant, the occasional crunch of something else walking nearby. Not toward them, but never far. They hiked for over an hour. Then Miguel stopped. Do you hear that? Harold turned. What? Crying. It was faint. Ahead in the trees, a woman's voice crying softly. Miguel, he turned to Harold. It's her again, it sounds just like her. Harold grabbed his arm. It's not her. Keep walking. But Miguel stepped toward it anyway, just a few feet. Then something moved in the fog, a blur. Fast, Miguel screamed. Something yanked him up off the ground. Harold turned and saw nothing, just Miguel's legs vanishing into the trees. The cry stopped. Then, Lunis, Harold backed away, nearly falling. The fog cleared for just a second, and there it stood. The Wendigo. Its mouth dripped red. It tilted its head, then spoke. Harold, he fired. The flare gun this time. The light hit it, and for a moment it screeched like metal tearing. It vanished into the fog. Harold ran. He didn't stop until his legs gave out. They found him 3 days later, frostbitten and unconscious near a ranger outpost. He was mumbling things in a voice that didn't sound like his. They never found Miguel, or the shelter, or the footprints. Just Harold's notebook, pages torn, one sentence circled over and over. It wears their voices. And even now, deep in the Smoky Mountains, when the fog rolls in too thick and too fast, people say they hear knocking and someone calling their name in a voice they thought was gone forever. They say the desert doesn't get cold. That's a lie. It was the middle of July when I stepped into Shadow Canyon, and the sun had just slipped behind the cliffs. That should have meant warm winds, maybe a little dry heat clinging to the rocks. But instead I felt it, sharp and sudden, like winter had found its way into the canyon and decided to stay. I zipped up my jacket, even though I knew it didn't make sense. A summer cold snap, the radio had called it. Just a fluke, they said. Nothing dangerous, but it felt dangerous. I'd gotten a call that morning. 3 college kids had hiked in and never came back out. Their car was parked at the South Point lot, doors locked, food still inside. No phone signal out here, no radios. That reached deep into this part of Zion. And no search and rescue this week. Just me. I've worked alone most of my life, and honestly, I prefer it. People get loud. Nature doesn't. Nature keeps its secrets and lets you listen. That's why I took the patrol out here myself. Just me, my pack, my boots, and the sound of the wind. But the wind also wasn't right. It howled, not like a storm, not like gusts through trees. It had a tone to it, a kind of rising and falling like singing, but made of pain. It echoed off the canyon walls and slipped into my ears like it belonged there, I told myself it was just the cliffs playing tricks again. The rocks here could throw your voice 100 different ways. I've heard my own footsteps sound like someone following me before. Still, I kept my hand close to my sidearm. Not because I thought I'd need it, but because something in my gut whispered, "Don't get caught off guard." About 2 miles in, I found the first sign that something was wrong. It was small, quiet, but I noticed it right away. A squirrel, barely alive, twitching on the trail. Its stomach was torn open, but not in the way a predator would do. There were no bites, no claw marks, just an opening, a slice, like it had been done with purpose. Its eyes moved like it saw me, like it knew me. I stepped back and crouched slowly. The moment I did, it stopped twitching, just died right there in front of me. No noise, no breath, and then, as if on cue, the wind started again. Louder this time, closer. It rushed down the canyon like it had somewhere to be, and maybe someone to find. That was when I realized the sunlight was gone. Not fading, gone. 1 minute it was late afternoon. The next it looked like dusk had swallowed everything whole. The shadows grew longer, thicker, until they bled into each other and turned the red rock walls into a dark looming throat. I looked up and saw no clouds, no sign of the sun, just sky darkening too fast. I reached for my flashlight. It flickered once, twice, then went out. I smacked it against my palm, cursing under my breath. Got it working again, barely, and that's when I saw it, etched into the dirt ahead, right. In the middle of the trail, a set of footprints, bare, human, small, a child's. I froze. There shouldn't have been kids out here. The missing hikers were all adults. These tracks weren't fresh either. The edges had crumbled like they'd been there for days. But I knew this trail. I walked it just last week. These weren't there, and now they were. They led off the path, toward the narrow edge of the canyon, where the drop was steep and the rocks were jagged. I followed them. I don't know why. I just did. I walked slow, careful not to make noise. The ground near the canyon edge crumbled easy, and one bad step could mean 100-foot drop. The kids' footprints, if that's really what they were, led toward a thin trail I hadn't used in years. Something in me told me to stop, but something else pulled me forward. Maybe it was the prints, maybe it was the cold, or maybe it was what I heard next. "Mom," a whisper, so soft I almost missed it. "Mom, help." I stopped breathing. That voice, it wasn't just a kid, it was my kid. I hadn't heard Jamie's voice in nearly 10 years. Not since the accident, not since that horrible night when everything went wrong. But right then, I could have sworn it was him. "Jamie," I whispered, heart pounding. No answer, just wind. I turned, in a slow circle, flashlight raised. My hands were shaking, but I kept going. I shouldn't have kept going. The trail curved into a small clearing tucked between sharp boulders. That's when I saw it. Something strange, lying up ahead. It was gear. My gear. Same model backpack. Same. Patch sewn into the side. Same rope, same thermos, same everything. But it wasn't mine, not the one on my back. This one was sitting in the dirt, covered in dust, as if it had been there for weeks. And it looked used, torn in places, burned even. I took a step closer, heart in my throat. The red mitten was hanging from one of the straps. My son's mitten. No one knew I kept that on my pack. No one. I knelt down, slowly, and reached for it. Just before my fingers touched it, crack. A sound above me. Stone shifting, feet on rock. I looked up. Something moved along the canyon wall, fast and low, like a man crawling, but wrong. It clung sideways, its limbs too long, its back arched like a spider's. I didn't see a face, just shape, color, motion, and then it was gone. The flashlight flickered again. I backed away from the strange pack, heart hammering now. The air had dropped again, colder than before. My breath fogged in front of me. It was summer. There was no reason for this kind of cold. I should have left. I should have turned back, called for help, waited for backup, even if it would take a day. But I didn't, because I wasn't thinking like a ranger anymore. I was thinking like a mother. Jamie had died when he was 8. We were camping in a snowstorm up near Bryce Canyon. I'd checked the weather, thought we'd be okay. But the storm came early, too strong, too cold. We were only a mile from shelter, but that mile stretched into forever. He collapsed. I tried. Everything, blankets, rubbing his hands, carrying him on my back. But it wasn't enough. By the time I got to the ranger cabin, he was already gone. I never forgave myself. Still haven't. People told me it wasn't my fault, that I didn't know. But I knew better. I should have waited. I should have never taken. Him up there, now hearing his voice in this canyon, seeing his mitten, it felt like the past had come back to punish me, or maybe to finish what it started. I didn't realize how cold I'd gotten until my fingers stopped working right. Numb, slow. I pulled the mitten from the pack and stuffed it in my coat pocket. Then I turned back toward the trail. But the trail was gone. Or maybe I just couldn't find it. Either way, I wasn't alone anymore. Something was watching me. And I had a feeling it wasn't my son. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the trees. My flashlight barely lit anything now. It buzzed in my hand like the battery was dying, but I'd replaced it just last week. I turned slowly, trying to spot the way I came from. No footprints, no trail markers, no signs. The canyon had changed on me. That's when I heard it, crunch. A single footstep in the gravel behind me. I spun around fast, light pointed ahead. Nothing, just trees and stone and shadows. I held my breath, waiting for another sound, another sign. But everything was still. No wind, no birds, not even the bugs. Just silence, thick and heavy. I took a shaky step back. That's when I noticed the footprints again, more of them now. Still small, still bare, still heading deeper into the canyon. But now they were fresh. Not days old, not even hours, minutes, maybe less. The cold was creeping in fast now, not like a regular chill. It felt like it was coming from inside me, like my bones were turning to ice. My breath fogged up and hung in front of my face like smoke. Even my teeth had started to chatter. This wasn't right. It wasn't normal weather. I'd hiked in blizzards, survived whiteouts, even slept through sleet, once in Wyoming. But this was something different. This cold didn't care about seasons or logic. This cold wanted something. I pulled my coat tighter and started walking. I didn't know why I kept going forward. Maybe I thought the missing hikers had gone this way. Maybe I hoped to find some sign of Jamie, real or not. Or maybe I was just too afraid to stop. Whatever the reason, I kept following the prints. They led to a dry creek bed with smooth rocks, and thorn bushes scattered around it. I moved slowly, watching every step, scanning the trees and shadows. And then I saw it again. That thing. It was perched on a high ledge above the creek, crouched low. Arms bent, knees up near its chest. It looked like a man, but wrong, skin too tight, limbs too long. Antlers curved from its head like tree branches caught in a storm. I couldn't see its face, but I felt it looking at me, even from that far away. I felt its stare crawl over my skin like fire and frost at the same time. I stepped back. My boot crunched on a stick. In a blink, it was gone. No sound, no movement, just gone. I backed up farther, flashlight shaking in my hand. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to drop my light. I didn't want to breathe too loud, because I knew something now. Whatever that thing was, it was playing with me. I found a small cave nearby, more like a crack in the canyon wall, just deep enough to sit in and think. I ducked inside, wrapped my arms around myself, and tried to warm up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the mitten. Jamie's mitten. It still smelled like old pine needles and soap. I held it close to my chest and closed my eyes. Mom. I opened them. That voice. It wasn't far. It's cold. Where are you? My hands trembled. That wasn't just any voice. It was him, my Jamie. The same tone, the same rhythm, the same soft whimper at the end. But I knew it wasn't real. I knew. And still it made me want to cry. Tears rolled down my cheeks without warning, because some part of me, even after all these years, still hoped, still dreamed. I wiped my face with my sleeve. "No," I whispered to the dark. "You're not him." The voice didn't answer. The silence was worse than any scream. That's when I heard the footsteps again, not behind me this time, inside the cave, and they were getting closer. The footsteps inside the cave were soft, barely there, but I knew they were real, one after another, slow, careful, like whatever it was didn't want to scare me. Yet, I held my breath. The flashlight in my hand flickered again. I smacked it against my palm, once, twice. Nothing. I was trapped in a narrow crack in the canyon wall, no more than 4 feet wide, crouched low, back to the cold stone. If something came in here, I wouldn't have anywhere to run. Then came the voice. "Mom?" It echoed off the rock, bounced back like it was coming from everywhere. "It's cold. I'm cold." I squeezed my eyes shut. No, that wasn't Jamie. That thing knew his voice, but it didn't know how to use it right. It was too slow, too soft in the wrong places, like it was reading a script. Still, it made my stomach twist. My heart thudded like a drum inside my chest. "Mommy, where are you?" The word mommy nearly broke me. He hadn't called me that since he was 5. It moved closer. I could hear its breath now, low, wet, like something trying to breathe through broken lungs. I held the mitten tighter, tucked against my chest, and reached slowly for the hunting knife in my boot. I didn't want to use it, but if this thing touched me, I was going to try. The flashlight buzzed once, then came back to life, and there it was, standing just outside the cave entrance. Tall, thin. Its skin was pale, like stretched wax. Veins ran through it, blue and black. Its limbs were too long, elbows, bending wrong, hands dragging near its knees, and the face, God help me. The face looked like someone had taken Jamie's features and stretched them across a skull far too big. The eyes were too wide, the mouth too long. It had antlers, twisted, gnarled things that scraped the rock above it. They weren't frozen. They weren't covered in snow. They were melting. Thick drops slid down the points and hissed as they hit the ground like hot grease on fire. It smiled. Too many teeth. Too sharp. Too human. "You left me," it said, tilting its head. I shook. My head slowly. "I didn't," I whispered. "You did." Its voice cracked like dry leaves. "You promised we'd be safe." That broke something inside me because I had promised him. Up in that snowy forest 10 years ago, I'd looked him in the eyes and said we'd be okay, that we were almost there, that help was coming. But help didn't come in time, and Jamie died in my arms. "I tried," I said, choking on the words. "I carried you. I ran. The thing screamed. Not loud. Not like an animal. It was sharp and high and short, like the air. Itself snapped. And suddenly it was inside the cave, crawling. Its body twisted sideways, knees and elbows grinding against stone. It was faster than it should have been. I kicked at it, slammed the flashlight into its face. It didn't bleed. It didn't blink. It laughed. I scrambled out of the cave and ran. The air outside was worse now, like walking through a freezer full of wet clothes and rust. The trees looked twisted, leaning in toward me. My boots hit frozen ground even though it had been dry rock just hours earlier. I didn't know where I was going, but I remembered the ridge. There was a narrow split in the canyon wall I'd seen earlier, one barely wide enough for a person. If I could get there, maybe I could trap it. I ran without thinking, lungs burning, knife in one hand, mitten in the other. Behind me I heard its limbs slapping stone, crawling, sprinting. It didn't run like a man, it ran like something pretending to be one. I saw the split in the rock ahead and ducked in. The walls pressed in on both sides. My shoulders scraped sandstone. My breath echoed in my ears. The creature didn't follow right away. It stood at the edge of the split and watched. "Don't leave me again, Mom." I didn't answer. My hands were shaking too hard now. I dropped the mitten. I didn't stop to pick it up. I ran toward the end of the narrow path where a shelf of rock leaned overhead. I remembered something about it, how loose it had looked, like one strong push could send it falling. I climbed up the side, grabbed a thick branch nearby, and waited. I heard the creature crawl in. No more talking, no more pretending. Just the sound of claws on stone. It was coming. I raised the branch high above the slab, waited for the shadow, and swung. The moment the shadow passed under me, I slammed the branch down with everything I had. The slab of rock didn't fall at first. It shifted, cracked, but held. The creature jerked its head upward, eyes glowing in the dim light like hot coals. Its jaw opened, wider than human, wider than possible. I dropped the branch and shoved the rock with my hands. It moved again, just enough. With a loud crack, the stone shelf broke free and crashed down. Dust exploded into the air. The canyon shook. Dropped to my knees, coughing hard, lungs full of grit. My fingers scraped against the rock as I crawled backward, away from the rubble. And for a moment, I thought it was over. Silence. No footsteps. No breathing. No voice calling out to me in that horrible way. I lay there for what felt like hours, heart pounding, waiting to hear it again. But nothing came. The sky above was dark now, not just from the hour, but from clouds rolling in heavy and gray. It looked like it might snow even though it was July. I didn't care. I was done. My body was sore. My hands were bleeding. My jacket had tears across the back where the creature's claws must have caught me. But I was alive. I stood up slowly, legs shaking, and turned to leave the canyon. Then I saw them. The antlers, sticking up from under the rock slide. Not moving. Just there, like tree branches poking out of a fresh grave. I stared for a long time. It could have been dead. It should have been. But something deep inside told me not to trust that. Not yet. The hike out took hours. I followed the cliff wall until I finally found the trail again. It looked different now, darker. The trees leaned in a little too much. The cold still clung to me like a wet blanket. But I kept walking, one foot after the other. Just like I did that night all those years ago, when I tried to carry Jamie to help. Except, this time, I made it out. By the time I reached the ranger station, the sky had started to snow. Light flakes, soft and quiet. My hands were too numb to unlock the door at first. I had to sit down, warm up, try again. Once I got inside, I lit a fire. The warmth didn't help much. I made tea, but I couldn't taste it. My skin felt cold, like the frost had gotten under it somehow. No matter how many layers I added, I just couldn't shake the chill. Later that night, I checked my backpack. The mitten was gone. I dug through every pocket. Checked the floor. Checked outside. Nothing. I never dropped it, I was sure of that. But it was gone. A few days later, a hiker came into the office. He looked shaken. Pale. Said he found something strange near the canyon edge. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small red mitten, nailed to a tree. No footprints around it. No blood. No explanation. Just the mitten, swaying in the wind like it had always been there. I didn't say anything. Just took it from him, nodded and thanked him for turning it in. He never came back. I keep the mitten in my desk drawer now. Sometimes I take it out and just stare at it. Other times I hear him again, Jamie's voice, soft and far away. Usually when it's cold, usually at night. It's been 3 weeks since Shadow Canyon. The snow melted 2 days after I got back. The weather went back to normal, like nothing had happened. Sunny skies, warm winds, clear nights. But I still feel cold, not outside, inside, like something settled deep in my chest and decided to stay. I've told no one, not the station chief, not the others, not even the search team that went in after me. They found nothing, no creature, no rock slide, No sign of the missing hikers, just a few scattered footprints that led nowhere and stopped suddenly like someone had just vanished. They marked it off as exposure, said maybe the kids wandered too far, got caught in the freak cold and lost their way. But I know better. Something is in those canyons, something that watches, waits, remembers. I've tried to move on. I go to work, I walk the trails, I help tourists find their way to the views they came for. I smile when I have to, but at night I don't sleep much. I keep the mitten in the drawer beside my bed now. I've tried locking it away, tried hiding it at the back of a closet. It always ends up back, in the drawer, exactly where I left it, and every time I touch it, it's ice cold, even in the middle of summer. Last night I woke up to a sound outside my cabin, footsteps, soft, bare, careful, like a child walking in the dirt. I grabbed my flashlight, heart pounding, and stepped outside. The trees were still, the wind was gone. But there, nailed to the old cedar by the porch, was another mitten, same size, same shape, only this one was blue. Jamie never owned a blue mitten, and the nail holding it was fresh. I don't know what it wants. I don't know if it followed me or if it's just always been here, hiding, waiting for someone like me. Maybe it's not done with me. Maybe it never will be. All I know is this. The canyon still calls to, the wind still whispers my name, and even now, sitting by the fire, wrapped in 3 blankets with the heater running full blast, I'm still cold. They say the cold in Alaska gets into your bones, but that's not true. It goes deeper, it gets into your thoughts, into your memories, into the silence behind your eyes. I felt that silence heavy in my chest the morning I left for the weather station. Arctic dawn had just begun to break, but light doesn't mean warmth up here. Everything was white, sky, ground, horizon, all one blinding frozen sheet. The kind of cold where your breath freezes on your eyelashes before it even hits the scarf. I started the snowmobile and headed out, the engine growling under me. The path was mostly flat, with some broken brush, half-buried rocks, and long shadows, stretching over the tundra like claws. The wind wasn't blowing yet. That's what bothered me. No wind in gates of the Arctic? That's like rain not falling in Seattle. I was going to check on a researcher who hadn't checked in for 2 days. Base said he was stationed near one of the old weather stations way out past the foothills. I didn't ask questions. You learn not to up here. You just go. About halfway there, I noticed something strange. A smell. Not the usual mix of oil, frost, and snowmobile fumes. This was smoky, sharp, like burned meat. I pulled up the scarf covering my nose, but it didn't help. The smell was strong, like someone left something too long over a fire. But there was no smoke. Nothing in sight, just snow and sky. I stopped the snowmobile, turned my head slowly, scanning. My ears picked up the faint clicking of ice shifting. Under itself, maybe a bird cry somewhere distant. But that smell, it was still there, just hanging in the still air like it didn't belong. I shook it off and kept going. About 15 minutes later, I saw the station. It stood alone, metal sides covered in frost, the roof half buried in snowdrifts. The wind vane on top spun like crazy, like it was in the middle of a storm. But there was no wind at all. None. My scarf didn't even move. I cut the engine. The quiet that followed was too quiet. I let the silence sit for a few seconds. That's something I do out here. Just listen. You'd be surprised how much the land can say when you give it time. But this time it didn't say anything. No rustling, no shifting snow, no bird calls. Just stillness. Even the wind vane's wild spinning made no sound. I stepped off the snowmobile and walked slowly toward the station. My boots crunched into snow that felt almost hollow underneath, like there wasn't earth below it, just air. I kept my eyes on the door. The metal looked warped. Not broken, just bent, like something had leaned on it. I reached for the knob. My glove stuck to it a little. Frostbite waiting to happen. I knocked first. I don't know why. Instinct. Maybe habit, no answer. Then I saw it, just a faint streak on the knob. Red, turned dark and cracked. Blood. And more of it trailing down to the snow in droplets that had frozen mid-drip. I followed the trail with my eyes. It led back around the side of the station, then vanished, like the snow had swallowed it. Looked down. One set of footprints led to the door. None led out. I hesitated, then opened the door. The cold inside hit me harder than the cold outside. It was the kind that doesn't just freeze your skin. It slows your heartbeat. A heavy kind of cold, like something was holding it there. The station was small, one room with a desk, 2 bunk cots, and a steel locker in the corner. I counted 3 people right away. All of them frozen stiff, all sitting on their knees, hands pressed together, like they were praying, but it wasn't peaceful. Their skin had turned a sick gray blue. Their clothes were crusted in frost. Their eyes were gone, not gouged out, just missing. No blood, no marks, just empty, frozen sockets staring into nothing. I took a step back, my boot hitting something soft. I looked down. Coat, torn. No blood, just shredded at the collar, as if someone had tried to rip it off while running. I turned back to the bodies. One of them wore a badge, the researcher I was sent for. Name was Eric Langston. Young guy, smart, smiled too much. Now he was frozen stiff, mouth open like he'd died screaming. That's when the radio crackled. I jumped. It wasn't static. It was a voice. But not just any voice. It was mine. Soft. Tired. Whispering. You left me. The voice repeated it. You left me. Again and again. Quiet, gentle. Like it was speaking from right behind my ear. Then it stopped. I turned slowly toward the desk. Lying there across Eric's chest was an antler. Single, curved, heavy. Reached out and touched it. It was warm. I didn't always work alone in the cold. I used to be a coal miner, down in the dark, miles beneath the ground. The kind of place where your hands never stop shaking, and you don't see sunlight for days. My brother Caleb worked beside me. He was younger, louder, always whistling, even in the mine. Then one day, the mine collapsed. I was the one holding the map. I was the one reading the compass. We were supposed to take the upper shaft, but I led us down the wrong tunnel. They said later the gas buildup was unavoidable, that the blast would have happened no matter what. But I know the truth. If we'd gone the other way, Caleb might still be here. I got out with a shattered leg and burned hands. He didn't get out at all. After that, I couldn't stand closed spaces. Couldn't stand voices either. People asking if I was okay. If I needed help. If I forgave myself. So I moved out here. Alaska, gates of the Arctic, the edge of nowhere. Became a ranger. Figured I owed something. Not to anyone in particular. Just something. Maybe to the land. Maybe to Caleb. I don't really know. People think it's peaceful being alone out here. It isn't. It's quiet, but not peaceful. You hear things in the cold, not loud things, soft things, crunches, whispers, cracks in the snow you can't explain. The wind hums like it's thinking, and the more time you spend in it, the more it feels like something's listening back. I learned to stop questioning it. You go nuts if you try to explain everything up here. Still, there are some things I don't talk about. Not to anyone. Like the broken compass I carry. It's the same one I used the day Caleb died. The needle spins uselessly now, but I keep it in my coat pocket. I guess it reminds me. Or maybe I'm just punishing myself. I don't tell anyone I believe the stories. You know the ones. The old Inuit tales, passed down by families who lived on this land long before us. About spirits that walk the wind, beasts that steal voices, creatures that feed not on flesh, but on hunger, starvation, regret, Wendigo. The first time I heard that word, I was still in the hospital. An old nurse whispered it when I told her how Caleb screamed for me, how I couldn't move, how I felt him die before I even heard the rocks fall. She said, it wasn't just the mine that took him. Something else was down there too, something cold. I laughed at the time, said she was just trying to comfort me, but later I started to wonder. And up here alone, I've seen things I can't explain. Trees with frost patterns that look like claws, tracks in the snow that stop mid-step, howling wind that circles without touching the ground. I never talk about it. I learned to shut up a long time ago. Let other rangers take the glory calls. I stick to the rough stuff. Lost hikers, storm watches, resupply routes through dead zones. Places even maps forget. I don't go out there to be a hero. I go because it feels right to be in places nobody else wants to be, like that weather station. I stood in the middle of the room, the frozen bodies around me, the smell of old smoke still stuck in my scarf. That radio voice, my voice, still ringing in my ears. That antler still warm in my hand. And I thought of Caleb. I thought about the last words he ever said to me. Don't leave me. I hadn't told anyone that. Not in 10 years. But here, now, I was hearing it again. From a radio that shouldn't have worked. In a voice that sounded exactly like mine. You left me. I let go of the antler, backed away. The cold in the room deepened. Not the usual kind. This one felt personal. It wrapped around my spine, settled in my chest. I started to feel like I didn't belong in my own skin. I wanted to run, but I've never run from anything. Not even when I should have. So I stepped outside. The sun hadn't moved. Still that flat light, no warmth. Still no wind. But the vane above the roof was still spinning wildly, around and around, clacking against the metal pole. I stared up at, trying to calm my breathing. That's when I saw them. Footprints, not mine, not the researchers. These were bigger, deeper, spread too far apart to be human. They circled the station, then led off into the trees toward the frozen river. And they hadn't been there when I arrived. The prints were fresh, pressed deep into the snow, wide at the toe, with long claw marks at the tips. I followed them with my eyes, but they didn't go far, just around the station and off toward the trees. Then they stopped, not faded, not covered, stopped, like something had just vanished into thin air. I crouched down to get a better look. The snow around the edges of the tracks had a strange shimmer to it, like thin glass, frost melted then frozen again. I reached out and brushed it with my glove. It was wet, but the air was freezing. That didn't make sense. My breath started to fog the edges of my goggles, so I stood and wiped them clear. The silence was thicker now, heavier. Even my own breathing felt too loud. Then I noticed the sky had changed. The clouds were coming in fast. Dark gray, the kind that don't bring snow right away, just a thick wall of cold. It rolled in like smoke over the mountains. I'd seen plenty of storms up here, but this felt different. Too fast, too quiet. I turned back toward the station and froze. There was something hanging from the top of the doorframe. It hadn't been there before. A strip of torn fabric, pale, blue like the researcher's coat, and tangled in it was something worse. A human tooth, small, smooth. No blood, no root, just clean, like it had been gently plucked. I didn't take it down, just stepped around it and went back inside. The bodies hadn't moved, but the air was colder. I could see my breath now, even inside. My fingers were stiff in my gloves. Toes. Starting to go numb. I needed answers. So I searched. The desk drawers were mostly empty. Old weather reports, some batteries, and a cracked flashlight. I found Eric Langston's journal tucked under his cot. I flipped through the last few pages. His handwriting got messier the further it went. The last thing he wrote said, "Something walks with the wind." Heard Caleb's voice. "Don't trust the snow." My heart dropped. He wrote my brother's name. But how could he have known? I stared at the page for a long time. The words looked shaky, rushed. The ink had smudged in places like he'd been sweating or crying. The next few pages were just drawings. Circles with antlers, sharp teeth, stick figures bent backward. I closed the book. Then the radio crackled again. I grabbed it. "Base, this is Elias Mercer. I'm at Station 7. 3 deceased. Unknown cause. Request immediate airlift." Static. Then, "You left me." My voice again, softer this time, closer. I shut the radio off, walked to the window and saw the snowmobile. It was half buried. When I'd parked it, the snow had been low, flat. But now it looked like it had been sitting there for hours, maybe longer. Wind-blown drifts had almost swallowed the back end. And the weird thing was, there was no wind. The air outside was still, no fresh snowfall either, just more weight, like something had dragged the snow over it on purpose. I ran outside. Tried to dig it out with my hands, but the snow was hard as ice, like it had frozen solid in seconds. I knocked on the engine cover. It made a dull, hollow sound. I turned the key. Nothing. Dead. I stood up slowly, looked around. The clouds had thickened. The light was dimmer now, like dusk had fallen too early. The trees in the distance blurred a little, their edges lost in a low fog creeping across the ground. That was when I heard it. Crunch. One single footstep. Behind me. I spun around. No one. Just empty snow. Then I heard breathing. But it wasn't mine. It was shaky, rattling, like lungs full of ice. I backed toward the station door, one hand on my flare gun, the other in my coat where the compass was. I didn't want to take it out, didn't want to see it spin. But I felt it anyway, felt it turning, even through the fabric I could tell. The air around me felt thicker, like something was pressing down on my shoulders. I got the door open and slammed it shut behind me, flipping the lock out of habit. Then I just stood there, in the middle of the room, listening. The wind vane outside had stopped spinning. Now it creaked, slow and heavy, like something was climbing on the roof. That's when I heard the voice again, not from the radio, from inside the room. "You left me, Eli." But this time it wasn't my voice. It was Caleb's. My heart didn't race, it sank, like something heavy had grabbed it and was pulling it down. That voice, Caleb's voice, I hadn't heard it in 10 years, not even in dreams. But now it was inside the room. I turned slowly, no sudden moves. My eyes scanned every corner, just frost-covered walls, quiet corpses, and my own breath floating in the freezing air. No one was there. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it. There was a pressure in the air, like the moment right before thunder. The walls creaked softly like they were breathing. Then I saw it. A shadow moved across the frosted window. It didn't walk. It glided. Tall, thin, too tall. Antlers brushing the edge of the roofline. Arms longer than they should have been, thin like tree branches. It had no real shape, just a stretched form half covered in fog. I ducked down, keeping low behind the desk. My flare gun was still in my coat. My fingers were shaking too much to pull it out. I didn't want to make a sound. Outside, the fog thickened. I could hear it now, like whispers blowing through dry leaves. Not words, just sounds that wanted to be words. I heard my name, then Caleb's, then voices I didn't know, crying, pleading, screaming, then nothing. Total silence. I waited. Seconds passed, then minutes. The cold got worse. My teeth started to chatter. I risked a peek out the window. The tracks were back. Not. Just one set, 3. All large, all wrong, and then I saw it again. This time it stood still, facing the station. Its face was a skull, but not human, elk or deer. Big antlers, blackened and broken at the tips. The eye sockets were empty, but I felt it looking right at me. Then it moved. Fast, it didn't walk like a person. It swayed like smoke, body cracking as it shifted. Each step left behind a trail of mist that froze into the ground. I backed away from the window, grabbed the flare gun, and ran to the other side of the station. I needed to get out. I unlocked the door and stepped into the fog. For a moment I couldn't see anything, just white. Then the air cleared, and it was standing 20 feet in front of me. Still, silent. It tilted its head and spoke. Eli. But it wasn't Caleb anymore. It was me, my own voice, same tone, same scratch, saying my name the way I Say it in my head when I'm thinking. I aimed the flare gun, it didn't move, but the voice came again. You left me in the dark. My legs wanted to run, but my mind was stuck. It stepped forward, slow, careful, and I fired. The flare hit its chest and exploded in red light. It screamed. The sound tore through the air like breaking glass. Every tree nearby shook, branches splitting and snapping like bones. My ears rang and I dropped to the ground, covering them. When I looked up, it was gone. The flare burned in the snow. I stood up, my body shaking, legs weak. I ran back into the station and slammed the door, locked it, moved the desk in front of it. I didn't feel safe. I felt hunted. The compass in my pocket started spinning again. I pulled it out. The needle whirled so fast it made a clicking noise, like it wanted to break free. I dropped it. Then I heard footsteps on the roof, heavy, slow, deliberate. Whatever it was, it knew I was trapped. I backed away, looking around the room. Then my eyes landed on the locker in the corner. Inside it, fuel canisters, emergency rations, old blankets, and a small toolkit. I had an idea. It was stupid, desperate, but it was all I had. I poured fuel in a circle around the middle of the room, lit one of the blankets with my lighter and tossed it onto the puddle. The flames roared to life. The heat was sudden, sharp. I hoped it would draw it in or burn it away. Then I heard a sound. Behind me. I turned and saw it inside. No door had opened. No window broken. It was just there, standing in the firelight, taller than before. Bent forward, arms hanging low. Its face now twisted into something more human. Its eyes had returned, but they weren't its. They were Caleb's, and they were crying. The room exploded into light and smoke. The heat pushed us both back. It screamed again, but this time it didn't vanish. It charged. I raised the flare gun again, but my foot slipped. I fell backward. Hit the floor hard. The flare fired wild, hit the wall. The creature stood over me. It raised its hand, or its claw. I couldn't move. My fingers reached for something, anything, and grabbed the broken compass. I held it up like a shield. Laughed. Two voices, mine and Caleb's, layered on top of each other. It didn't swing, it didn't claw. It impaled me. The antler, straight through the chest. The cold rushed in fast. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. Only one thing stayed, clear in my mind. The compass needle had stopped spinning. I didn't feel pain, just cold, deep cold. The kind that doesn't stay on your skin but goes straight into your bones. I couldn't move my arms, couldn't feel my legs. I was lying on the floor, staring up at the creature standing over me. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. Its eyes, Caleb's eyes, stared into mine, full of sadness, full of blame. Smoke filled the station. The fire I started was spreading fast. The ceiling cracked above me. Flames licked the metal walls. The creature didn't seem to care. It just stood there, watching me freeze. Then it bent, down, and pulled the compass from my coat. The same compass that led us into the mine all those years ago. It stared at it for a long moment, then pressed it into my chest, right over the wound. I couldn't stop it. Couldn't do anything but watch. Then it stood up, turned toward the wall, and walked through it. No door, no sound, just passed into the smoke and vanished. I lay there, smoke and snow mixing in the air around me, eyes burning, body numb. I thought maybe this was how it felt for Caleb, trapped, helpless, cold. But I wasn't scared, not anymore, only sorry. My eyes started to close, but before they did, I saw the snow begin to fall inside the station. Tiny flakes. No hole in the roof, no opening, just the snow drifting down through the firelight like ashes. Then everything went dark. They found me 3 days later, or what was left of me. A search team had been sent when I missed the second check-in. They had to come on foot. The weather grounded all flights. They found the station burned halfway to the ground, still smoldering under the ice. They found 3 corpses inside, frozen solid, eyes gone, and they found me, upright, kneeling, like I'd placed myself there, frozen stiff, hands pressed together like the others. They said it didn't make sense, that the fire should have burned me, that no one could have survived that heat then freeze like that afterward. But I was whole, unburned, frozen clean. The only thing that marked me was the broken compass, half melted, pressed deep into my chest like a badge. They took pictures, wrote reports. None of it made sense. One of the men, a younger ranger named Mitch, swears he heard something in the wind as they loaded my body onto the sled. Laughter, but not one voice. Two. One was mine. The other, he couldn't say. The weather station was shut down after that. The land around it was marked off limits. They blamed it on structural failure. Some said gas pockets had leaked, poisoned everyone. But locals knew better. They didn't talk much, but when they did, they used a word I hadn't heard in a long time. Wendigo, the creature that walks with the wind, that feeds not on bodies, but on sorrow, on regret, on hunger, not for food, but for things you can never have again. I became another story, another name. And when the wind picks up in gates of the Arctic, when it starts to howl and twist through the trees even though the air is still, some say you can hear me, whispering, still carrying the weight of that day, still trying to make it right. You left me. You left me. The cold doesn't kill you fast. It waits. It listens. And if you've got something inside you, something broken, something unfinished, it finds you. It takes your shape, your voice, and it reminds you of what you did or what you didn't do. If you ever go out there, out where the maps start to fade and the snow never melts, and you hear someone call, your name, don't answer no matter how familiar it sounds, because it's not your friend, it's not your brother, it's not you, it's the wind, and it's hungry, always hungry. I never thought I'd find my sister as a living statue, her skin slowly turning to crystal while she screamed silently for help. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, 3 months ago, when everything in Death Valley started going wrong. My name is Hannah Reynolds, and I've spent most of my life in places that would kill the average person in a day. As a park ranger at Death Valley National Park and former desert warfare instructor, I thought I knew every way the desert could try to kill you. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The day everything began, the temperature hit 130 degrees Fahrenheit. The kind of heat that makes your eyeballs feel like they're baking in your skull. I was doing my usual morning patrol when dispatch called about another sinkhole, the 4th one this week. They just kept appearing overnight, perfect circles in the sand like someone had taken a giant ice cream scoop to the desert floor. Reynolds here, I said into my radio, wiping sweat from my forehead. Where's this one? Near the ancient wash area. And Hannah. The dispatcher paused. This one's different. You need to see it yourself. I'd been extra alert since Sarah, my little sister and fellow ranger, disappeared 3 months ago. The official story was that she'd gotten lost on a routine patrol, but I knew better. Sarah knew these lands like the back of her hand. She wouldn't just vanish. 20 minutes later, I parked my Jeep near the new sinkhole. The moment I stepped out, I felt something was off. The air felt wrong, heavy, like the moment before a massive storm, except there wasn't a cloud in the sky. The sinkhole was massive, about 30 feet across. But what made me stop in my tracks were the walls. They were lined with ancient petroglyphs I'd never seen before, which was impossible. I'd mapped every piece of rock art in this section of the park. These were different. They showed long, snake-like creatures swimming through rock like it was water. The paintings depicted them hunting people, turning them into what looked like crystal statues. My hands shook as I took photos, not from the heat this time. That's when I heard it. A low rumble beneath my feet, like a subway train passing deep underground. Except Death Valley doesn't have subways. The ground trembled, and my training kicked, and I backed away from the edge just as a chunk of the sinkhole wall crumbled away. As I watched, the sand at the bottom of the hole began to move, not like normal sand blown by wind, but like something was swimming through it. Something big. My radio crackled. "Hannah, we've got reports of seismic activity in your area. Get to safe ground now." But I couldn't move, because right there, half buried in the sinkhole wall, was a familiar object catching the morning sun. Sarah's silver pendant, the one Mom gave her before she died. The one she never took off. The rumbling grew stronger, and I made a choice that would change everything. I started climbing down into that hole toward the pendant. That's when I saw my first glass statue, partially buried in the sand. A hiker, frozen in mid-run, their face a mask of terror. Their bodies sparkled in the sun like crystal. And inside I could swear I saw movement. The ground shook again, harder this time. And deep below, something answered with a sound that wasn't quite a roar and wasn't quite a scream. Something that had no business existing in our world. That was the moment I realized Death Valley had been hiding secrets. Ancient secrets. And my sister's disappearance was just the beginning. What I didn't know then was that I was about to face creatures that defied everything I knew about desert survival. Creatures that would make me question not just what lived in the desert's depths, but what it meant to be human at all. And somewhere out there, my sister was waiting. If she was still alive. If she was still human. The next morning I gathered a small team to investigate the sinkhole properly. There were 4 of us. Me, Tom, our geology expert, Maria, who specialized in ancient rock art, and Pete, our safety officer. We all knew each other well, had shared countless campfires and rescue missions together. But none of us was prepared for what we'd find. We set up our ropes and climbing gear as the sun rose. The morning light made long shadows across the desert, and everything was quiet. Too quiet. Usually you'd hear birds, or at least the wind, but today there was nothing. "Hannah," Maria called out softly. She was studying the petroglyphs on the sinkhole walls. "These markings, they're not like anything I've ever seen. The paint goes deep into the rock like it was burned in." I climbed down beside her, my boots crunching on loose gravel. She was right. I reached out to touch one of the snake creature drawings. The rock felt warm, warmer than it should have been, even in the morning sun. "Guys," Tom's voice echoed from below. "You need to see this." We found him standing in front of what looked like a cave entrance. Except this cave hadn't been here yesterday. The walls were smooth, almost polished, like something had melted through the rock. "This isn't natural," Tom whispered, shining his flashlight inside. "Rock doesn't melt like this, not by itself." That's when we heard it. A soft clicking sound, like marbles rolling against each other, coming from deep inside the cave. "We should document this and get back up," Pete said, but I was already pulling out my flashlight. Sarah's pendant had been here. "This cave might lead to answers." 10 minutes, I said. "We go in, take pictures, and get out. Standard safety protocol." The cave felt wrong from the moment we stepped inside. Our footsteps echoed strangely, and the air had a sharp chemical smell, like cleaning supplies mixed with something rotten. We hadn't gone far when Maria's scream bounced off the walls. Her flashlight beam had caught something in a corner. Another glass statue. This one was a park ranger. I recognized him as Dave Wilson, who'd gone missing 2 weeks ago. He was frozen mid-stride, one hand reaching out like he was trying to grab something. His face, I'll never forget his face. Pure terror captured in perfect crystal detail. "This can't be real," Pete whispered, reaching out to touch the statue. "Don't," I grabbed his hand. "We don't know what caused this." That's when we noticed something even stranger. Inside the crystal figure there were tiny movements like trapped air bubbles rising in a glass of water. Except they weren't random. They seemed to pulse, almost like a heartbeat. Tom took out his geology tools and carefully scraped a tiny sample from the base of the statue. "Whatever this is, it's not normal glass or crystal. The structure is all wrong." The clicking sound came again, louder this time. And now there was something else. A soft scraping like sandpaper against stone. It was coming from deeper in the cave. "Time to go," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Now." We turned, around, and found ourselves staring at a dead end. The tunnel we'd come through was gone, replaced by smooth, solid rock. "This is impossible," Tom said, running his hands over the wall. "We just came this way." The scraping sound was getting closer. Small rocks and pebbles on the cave floor started to vibrate. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. Maria's flashlight beam caught something moving along the ceiling, something that looked like flowing sand, except it was moving against gravity. As we watched, frozen in horror, the sand began to take shape, forming into something long and serpentine. "Nobody move," I whispered, remembering my desert warfare training. Slow, quiet breaths. The thing on the ceiling was at least 20 feet long, with scales that looked like crystals. They clicked together as it moved, making that marble rolling sound we'd heard earlier. My mind was racing. The petroglyphs, the glass statues, the moving walls, it all connected. These creatures weren't just real. They'd been here for centuries, maybe longer. A drop of something hit the ground near my feet. It sizzled, eating into the rock like acid. Above us, the creature was directly overhead, its crystal scales catching our flashlight beams and throwing rainbow patterns on the walls. I had to get my team out. But more importantly, I finally had a lead on Sarah. If these things had taken her, if they'd turned her to crystal like Dave. The creature moved slightly, and in that moment, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Tangled in its scales was a piece of familiar blue fabric, the same color as Sarah's uniform. We were about to find out exactly what these things could do, and I had a feeling we weren't going to like the answer. Time seemed to freeze as we stood there, barely breathing, with the crystal creature above us. My mind raced through every survival technique I knew, but none of them covered what to do. When faced with a giant sand-swimming snake with acid drool, "When I say run," I whispered so quietly I could barely hear myself. "Head right. There's another tunnel forming." I wasn't crazy. I could see it happening. The wall to our right was melting somehow, like the rock was turning to thick soup. The creature was making an escape route, but not for us. It was making it for itself. The thing above us shifted, and more drops of acid fell. One landed on Pete's backpack, eating through it instantly. His water bottle crashed to the ground with a clang that echoed through the cave. Everything happened at once. The creature dropped from the ceiling, its crystal scales making a sound like wind chimes in a storm. We ran. Not the careful, planned escape I'd wanted, but a desperate sprint toward the new tunnel. "Don't look back," I shouted, pushing Maria ahead of me. I could hear the thing moving behind us, its scales scraping against rock. The sound was getting closer. Tom stumbled, and I grabbed his arm, yanking him forward. Just in time, a spray of acid hit the ground where he'd been standing. The tunnel ahead split into two paths. "Left!" I yelled, remembering the old survival rule. Always go left in a cave. It makes it easier to find your way back. We rounded the corner and found ourselves in a large cave room. Sunlight streamed in from a hole in the ceiling, catching the creature's scales as it flowed into the room after us. In the light, I could finally see it clearly. It was beautiful, in a terrifying way. Its scales weren't just crystal. They were like prisms, throwing rainbow light across the cave walls. Its head was arrow-shaped with no eyes that I could see. But it knew exactly where we were. "The light," Tom gasped. "Look at it." The creature seemed to be growing stronger in the sunlight. Its scales brightened, and it moved faster, more confidently. That's when things got worse. The creature's body began to split, like a cell dividing. In seconds, we were facing three smaller versions of the thing, each about the size of a large python. "Up!" I pointed to a narrow ledge near the ceiling hole. "Get to the sunlight." Pete went first, then Maria. Tom was halfway up when one of the smaller creatures shot forward like a bullet. I grabbed a rock and threw it, hitting the thing's scales. The sound it made was like breaking glass. The creature reared back, stunned. That's when I noticed something odd. The piece of scale I'd hit had gone dark, like a light turning off. "Hannah, come on!" Maria screamed from above. I started climbing, but the rock was smooth, hard to grip. Below, the creatures were recovering. starting to move up the wall after me. Their scales made tiny tinkling sounds like ice cracking. That's when I saw it. On a small ledge just out of reach, another piece of Sarah's uniform. A sleeve, torn and dirty, but definitely hers. She was here, I muttered. She got away. One of the creatures lunged at my legs. I kicked out, connecting with its head. More. Scales went dark. The creature fell back, but its two siblings were still coming. I was almost to the top when I felt something grab my boot. Looking down, I saw one of the creatures had caught me. Its scales were starting to glow brighter, and I could feel heat through my boot. "Hold on." Pete reached down, grabbed my arms, and pulled. My boot came free just as the creature's scales began to crystallize it. We scrambled out into the desert sun. The creatures didn't follow. They stayed in the shadow of the cave, their scales clicking angrily. "They don't like direct sunlight," Tom said between heavy breaths. "Strong sunlight, I mean. They stayed in the shadowy parts of the cave even when they were chasing us." I looked at my partially crystallized boot. The material was slowly turning clear, like glass. "They're not just hiding from the sun," I said. "They're using it, storing, somehow. That's why their scales glow." Maria was staring at her phone. "No signal," she said. "We need to warn people. These things, they're hunting." "Not just hunting," I said, holding up Sarah's torn sleeve. "They're collecting, and my sister is still alive somewhere down there." Pete shook his head. "Hannah, you don't know that. These things turn people to crystal. We saw Dave." Dave looked scared, I cut in. "Sarah's sleeve shows signs of a fight. She's a survivor like me. She's alive." I looked back at the cave entrance. The creatures had retreated deeper inside, but I could still hear their scales clicking, like they were talking to each other. "We need backup," I said. "Real backup. And we need to understand what these things are." The petroglyphs showed them. Hunting, but they also showed something else. People fighting back. Tom held up the rock sample he'd taken from Dave's crystal statue. "I'll get this analyzed. There has to be a way to stop the crystallization process." As we walked back to our vehicles, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd just scratched the surface. The creatures we'd seen were small compared to the one in the petroglyphs, and if they could split into smaller versions, how big was their mother? The thought made me walk faster. We had to hurry. Because somewhere in those caves my sister was either fighting to stay alive or slowly turning to crystal, and I wasn't going to stop until I found her, no matter how deep into the earth I had to go. 2 days later we were back. This time, we came prepared, or as prepared as you can be when dealing with crystal snakes that swim through rock. Our team had grown. Besides me, Tom, Maria, and Pete, we now had a military squad backing us up. They didn't believe our story about the creatures at first, until I showed them my crystallized boot. Now they believed. "Remember," I told everyone as we geared up, "they get stronger in sunlight, but they need shadows to hunt. Stay in bright areas when possible, but always have a backup plan." We had special suits, the kind they use for handling dangerous chemicals. If the creature's acid hit us, we'd have a few seconds to get the suit off before it ate through. Team 1 will create a distraction at the main cave, I explained. Team 2, that's us. We go in through the new entrance we found yesterday. The creatures can make tunnels, but they seem to prefer using the same paths over and over. I didn't tell them my real plan. While everyone was focused on searching the main tunnels, I was going to look for signs of Sarah. The piece of sleeve we'd found had given me hope, but also worried me sick. It had tiny crystal fragments on it, like the crystallization had already started when she tore free. We entered the cave system as the sun was highest in the sky, hoping the creatures would be slower, maybe sleeping. The new entrance was tight. We had to crawl on our stomachs for the first 50 feet. "Listen," Maria whispered as we reached a larger tunnel. We all went still. From somewhere deep below came a sound like someone running their finger around the rim of a giant glass. It was beautiful and scary at the same time. "Motion sensors are picking up something big," one of the soldiers whispered, checking his equipment. "Really big, about 300 feet down." That's when Tom's radio crackled. Team 1 here. We found something. Some kind of collection room. My heart jumped. What do you mean, collection room? Glass statues, came the reply. Dozens of them. But they're different from the one we saw before. These ones are only partially crystallized. And I swear some of them are moving. I looked at my team. They nodded. We all knew where we were going. The tunnel sloped down steeply. Our headlamps showed more petroglyphs on the walls, but these were different. They showed people changing, turning into something that wasn't quite human anymore. The collection room was huge, like a giant underground theater. Our lights caught the crystal statues, making them sparkle. But Team 1 was right. These weren't like Dave's statue. These people were only partly turned to crystal. Some just had crystal hands or feet. Others were crystal up to their waists or chests. Maria pointed to something at the far end of the room. Look, there was a figure there sitting against the wall. Crystal covered most of their body, but their face was still human. And I knew that face. Sarah. I ran forward, forgetting all about safety protocols. My sister's eyes opened. They were her normal brown, but with tiny crystals around the edges, like she was crying diamond tears. Hannah? Her voice was rough, like she hadn't used it in weeks. You actually came. Of course I came. I'm getting you out of here. She shook her head. You don't understand. They're not killing us. They're changing us, making us like them. The crystal on her arms caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across her face. The big one. Sarah swallowed hard. Their queen. She's been here for thousands of years, sleeping under the desert. But the heat wave woke her up. She's hungry. Not for food, for sunlight. She needs new crystals to store the sun's energy. That's what we are to her. Batteries. A low rumble shook the cave. Dust and small rocks rained down from the ceiling. She's coming, Sarah whispered. She knows you're here. The rumble grew stronger. The glass statues around us started to vibrate, making a sound like 1,000 wind chimes in a storm. We need to go, Pete said. Now! I'm not leaving without Sarah, I said, trying to help her up. But the crystal covering her legs had grown to the rock floor. She was stuck. Hannah, listen to me. Sarah grabbed my arm. Her hand was warm, too warm, and I could feel tiny crystals growing where she touched me. The queen can't leave the deep caves. Too much direct sunlight would overload her crystals. That's why she makes the small ones, the hunters. But during the eclipse next week, the cave shook harder. A crack appeared in the floor, spreading from wall to wall. Team 1, get out now, I shouted into my radio. Everyone out. That's when we saw it. Rising from the crack in the floor came the biggest crystal I'd ever seen. But it wasn't just a crystal. It was moving, growing, taking shape. The queen was here, and we were about to find out exactly what she had planned for Death Valley. And for the human race. Sarah squeezed my hand. Run, sis. Come back during the eclipse. That's when she'll be weakest. That's when you can save us all. I didn't want to leave her. Every part of me screamed to stay and fight. But as the queen rose higher, her crystal body filling the cave, with rainbow light, I knew Sarah was right. We weren't ready for this fight, not yet. I'll come back, I promised. Hold on, Sarah. Just hold on. As we ran from the cave, the queen's roar shook the whole desert. And I swear, mixed in with the sound of breaking crystal and grinding rock, I heard laughter. The kind of laughter that says, soon, soon everything will change. We had 5 days until the eclipse. 5 days to figure out how to save my sister and all the others trapped in that crystal cave. I barely slept, spending every moment either planning or checking my own hands for signs of crystals growing from where Sarah had touched me. Tom's test results on the crystal samples finally came back. He burst into my office early morning, looking like he hadn't slept either. The crystals are like solar panels, he explained, spreading papers across my desk. But they're also alive somehow. They grow stronger in sunlight, but too much direct sun makes them unstable. That's why they hide in caves. How does this help us save Sarah? I asked, rubbing my tired eyes. Think about it, Hannah. During the eclipse, they'll be at their weakest. But right before it, When the light starts dimming, they'll panic, try to absorb as much sunlight as they can. If they take in too much, they'll shatter, I finished, like overcharging a battery. Maria joined us, carrying more petroglyphs she'd photographed. "Look at this," she said, pointing to one drawing. "The ancient people who drew these, they knew about the eclipse too. They fought the queen during one. See the dark sun symbol? A plan started forming in my mind. A crazy, dangerous plan, but it was all we had. We spent the next 4 days gathering. Equipment, mirrors, solar panels, powerful lights, anything that could help us direct sunlight. The military brought in special explosives that could be triggered remotely. We were going to turn that cave into a death trap for the queen. But time wasn't on our side. Every night I had the same nightmare, arriving too late, finding Sarah completely turned to crystal. No human part left to save. The morning before the eclipse, we got reports of more sinkholes appearing across Death Valley. The queen was expanding her tunnel network, preparing for something big. She's not just hunting anymore, I told my team as we did our final equipment check. Sarah said the queen needs batteries, living crystal batteries. Tomorrow, during the eclipse, when she's supposed to be weakest, she's planning to come to the surface, Pete finished. Use all those stored people batteries to protect herself from the sun. Then she can hunt in daylight. And make more like her, Tom added quietly. We entered the cave system that evening, setting up our equipment. The creatures left us alone, which worried me more than if they'd attacked. They were saving their strength. I found Sarah in the collection room. More. Crystal had grown over her, leaving only her face and one hand free. Other victims around her were even worse, some completely covered except for an eye or a finger. "You came back," she whispered when she saw me. Her voice was different now, musical, like wind through crystal chimes. I promised, didn't I? I tried to smile, kneeling beside her. "We're getting you out tomorrow, all of you." Sarah's partly crystallized face caught the light from my headlamp, throwing tiny rainbows. "Hannah, even if you stop her, we might not change back. The crystal, it's part of us now." "I don't care," I said, taking her human hand. "Crystal or not, you're my sister, we'll figure it out." That's when everything went wrong. The cave floor began to shake. Not like before, this was worse. The walls started to crack, and a sound, like breaking glass, filled the air. "She knows." Sarah's eyes went wide. "The queen, she knows what you're planning. She's starting early." The ground split open. Crystal spires shot up everywhere, nearly impaling several soldiers. The queen was rising, and she wasn't waiting for the eclipse. "Everyone out," I shouted. "Get to your positions." But as my team ran, the tunnel entrance began to crystallize, closing up. We were trapped. The queen rose from the ground like a mountain of living crystal. She was beautiful and horrible, a giant serpent made of rainbow light and sharp edges. Where her eyes should have been, there were just more crystals, but somehow I knew she was looking right at me. "Hannah." Sarah's voice was getting weaker. The crystal was growing faster now, climbing up her neck. "The light. Use the light." I looked at my sister, then at the queen, then at all our equipment scattered around the cave. The eclipse wasn't for another 12 hours, but maybe we didn't need to wait for the sun to go dark. Maybe we just needed to create our own eclipse. I grabbed my radio. "New plan," I said, "and it's completely crazy. But it's all we've got." The queen loomed over us, her crystal body filling most of the cave. As I looked up at her, I realized something. We weren't just fighting for Sarah anymore. We were fighting for every person who might become part of the queen's crystal battery collection, and I was done running from monsters who hid in the dark. The queen towered above us, her crystal body pulsing with stored sunlight. Our original plan was ruined. We couldn't wait for the eclipse anymore. But sometimes the craziest plans work best, especially when you have nothing left to lose. "Listen up," I shouted to my team. "Get every light, every mirror, every shiny surface we brought. Point them all at the cave ceiling." The queen watched, smooth, her crystal head tilting like a curious snake. She wasn't attacking yet. Maybe she thought we were too small to be a threat. Or maybe she was just playing with us. The crystals store sunlight, I explained quickly. If we can't wait for the eclipse to weaken her, we'll do the opposite. We'll overload her. Tom caught on first. Like throwing too much power into a circuit, it'll blow. We worked fast, setting up our equipment while the queen slowly wrapped her crystal coils around the cave walls. Every few minutes, more crystal would grow over the trapped people. Sarah was fighting it, but the crystal had almost covered her face now. "Ready!" Maria called out, positioned by the power switches. I looked at the queen, then at my sister. "You want batteries?" I said loudly. "Let's see how much power you can handle." "Now!" I screamed. Every light we had blazed on at once. Spotlights, military grade. Floodlights, emergency beacons. The beams hit the mirrors we'd positioned, bouncing and multiplying, turning the cave into a stadium of light. The effect was instant. The queen's crystal body began to glow brighter and brighter. Rainbow colors danced across the walls as she tried to absorb all the energy. But it was too much, too fast. A high-pitched sound filled the air, like a wine glass about to break. The queen reared up, her crystal segments grinding against each other. "It's working," Pete shouted. "She's overloading." But the queen wasn't finished. With a sound like shattering glass, she split into dozens of smaller creatures, trying to spread out the energy. The baby crystal snakes slithered toward us, their scales blazing with stored light. "Keep the lights on her," I yelled, running toward Sarah. The crystal had almost covered her completely, but her eyes were still human, still fighting. The queen was reforming, but different now. Her crystal body was cracking, light pouring out from inside. The smaller creatures were trying to rejoin her, but they were breaking apart too. That's when I noticed something amazing. Where the queen's light touched the crystallized people, their crystal shells were cracking. The queen had stored pieces of them inside herself, and now she was losing control. "The explosives," I called to the military team. "Set them off now," the tie. Cave rocked with explosions. Chunks of ceiling fell, letting in the first rays of morning sun. The queen screamed, a sound like 1,000 windows breaking at once. "Sarah." I grabbed at the crystal covering my sister, ignoring the burning pain in my hands. "Hold on!" The crystal was hot, almost too hot to touch, but it was cracking. I could see Sarah's face clearly now, her eyes wide with hope and fear. With a final, earth-shaking roar, the queen's body began to break apart. Light poured from her like a broken sun. The smaller creatures exploded into crystal dust. And everywhere, people were breaking free from their crystal prisons. "Cover your eyes," Tom yelled. The queen's body exploded. I threw myself over Sarah, feeling crystal shards rain down on my back. There was a flash of light so bright it went through my closed eyelids, then silence. When I opened my eyes, the cave was different. Sunlight streamed in through the broken ceiling. Where the queen had been, there was only a pile of dull crystal pieces, no bigger than gravel. "Sarah?" I whispered, looking at my sister. She moved, crystal fragments falling from her like broken glass. She was alive. Different. There were still crystal patches on her skin that caught the light. But alive. "That was a crazy plan," she said weakly. Managing a smile. "Guess it runs in the family." All around us, people were helping each other up. Everyone who'd been trapped was like Sarah, mostly human again, but with bits of crystal that wouldn't go away. Like a reminder of what they'd survived. We got everyone out as the sun rose over Death Valley. The cave system was collapsed now, buried under tons of rock. If there were any more crystal creatures down there, they'd have to dig a long way up. 3 months later, Sarah and I stood watching the sunset from her hospital room. The doctors still couldn't explain the crystal patches on the survivor's skin. They glowed softly in sunlight, like tiny windows catching rainbows. "Do you think there are more?" Sarah asked quietly. "Other queens sleeping under other deserts?" I looked at my hand, where a small patch of crystal had grown from when I'd helped Sarah escape. It didn't spread anymore, but it didn't go away. "Either." "Probably," I said. "But now we know how to fight them." Sarah nodded, touching her own crystal-patched skin. "And if they come back, we'll be ready," I finished. The sun dropped below the horizon and our crystal patches gave one last gleam before going quiet. Somewhere deep under the desert, ancient creatures might be sleeping, dreaming of sunlight and human batteries, but they'd think twice before hunting in Death Valley again. Because sometimes the things you try to turn into batteries learn how to fight back. And my sister and I, we had some new sparkle to us now, but we were still human, still survivors, still family. That's the thing about deserts. They're full of secrets, some beautiful, some terrible. But if you're brave enough, smart enough, and love someone enough, you can survive anything they throw at you. Even crystal snakes that swim through stone. Last week, a child got lost in Death Valley. When my sister and I found her, she wasn't scared at all. She said the pretty rainbow lights had shown her the way back. Sarah and I just looked at each other and smiled. Our crystal patches glowed a little brighter in the sunset. Sometimes the things that try to change you end up making you stronger instead. And sometimes, just sometimes, they leave you with a little magic of your own. I still patrol Death Valley, every day. The crystal in my hand glows warm when I pass certain caves, like it's warning me. Or maybe it's warning whatever might be down there. Either way, I'm ready. We all are. Because that's the thing about desert dwellers. We adapt, we survive. And we protect our own, even if we sparkle a little while doing it. I've walked the woods my whole life, but that morning the forest felt wrong. Like the land was breathing under my boots, like the trees were leaning in to listen. It was July, thick, heavy summer air in the Great Smoky Mountains, the kind that sticks to your skin and makes your shirt cling like a second layer. My boots sank just a little deeper into the soft trail than usual, and sweat rolled down my back in slow, steady lines. I'd been sent to check Trail 19, the one they shut down last year after those weird sightings. Locals had started whispering again. Lights, shapes, sounds at night. Of course, they never gave details. Just said it was bad juju and left it at that. I wasn't there for stories. I was there because it was my job. But still, something felt off from the second I stepped past the trail closed sign. The sun was high, but the light kept flickering, like old film skipping in a projector. 1 second golden, the next dim and cold. I looked up through the trees and saw the branches swaying, even though there wasn't a breeze. It was like the forest was moving on its own rhythm, and I wasn't part of it. Birdsong had stopped an hour back. No rustling, no buzzing. Just the slow creak of trees and the wet sound of my boots in the dirt. I thought about turning back, but I didn't. About 2 miles in, I caught a smell. Sharp, metallic, like blood, but sour. My gut tightened. That's when I saw it. A black bear. But not just any bear. It was hanging in a tree. At first I thought it had climbed up and gotten stuck somehow, but no. This wasn't natural. Its back legs were caught high in the branches, and the body was twisted, spine bent the wrong way, like it had been snapped in half and draped like a coat over the limbs. Its bones were wrong. Some turned inside out, if that makes any sense. Like someone had reached inside and flipped them. No claw marks, no bullet wounds, just wrongness. I stepped back. My hands started to shake. I told myself I'd seen worse in Nam, and I had. But this was different. Back then, men bled. They cried out. There was reason to the horror. This was something else. As I stood there trying to make sense of it, I heard a low hum. Not bees, not a generator. Just a sound in the air. Faint at first, then growing louder. It buzzed in my chest, like a speaker turned too low but pressed against your heart. I looked around, spinning slowly. The trees behind me seemed closer than they were before. Their shadows stretched out longer, too long for the sun that hung above me. I reached for the compass strapped to my wrist. My daughter's. Casey. She'd gone missing a year ago. Last seen not far from here. Her compass never worked after. She vanished, but I wore it anyway. It didn't move. Dead still. I don't know how long I stood there staring at that bear. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been 20. I finally backed away, careful with every step. That's when I noticed the silence was gone. The hum had returned, but now it had a rhythm, like breathing, long, slow, drawn-out exhales of sound. In, out, in, out. It was coming from the trees, not one spot, all around me. I've been in storms, I've been in firefights, but I've never felt my heart beat that fast while everything around me stood still. Something was watching. Not like a cougar from the shadows, this was bigger, older. I couldn't explain it, but I knew it. I knew I had just crossed into a place that didn't want me there, and it was too late to leave. I didn't become a park ranger because I loved nature. I became one because I didn't know what else to do. After the war, nothing felt right. Noise was too loud, silence was worse, and crowds made me twitchy. For a while, I drank too much and talked too little. It was Casey, my daughter, who gave me something worth living for. She used to drag me out of the house, pull me into hikes, show me how trees made her feel small in a good way. Not like fear, but like wonder. She said the woods made her feel like everything had a purpose. I started believing that too. And when I finally got my act together, I put on the ranger badge. Not just to protect the forest, but to protect people like her. But I failed. Casey disappeared 1 year ago, almost to the day. She was 23, smart, curious, always pushing herself. She came out here to do a solo hike, wanted to follow her own trail off the beaten path like she always did. The last photo she sent me was from a ridge near Trail 19. Her hair was in a braid. She was smiling. Sky behind her was clear and blue. That night, she didn't answer her phone. The search teams combed the forest for 2 weeks. I led some of them myself. Dogs couldn't track anything. It was like she'd vanished without a trace. Not a shoe print, not a wrapper. Nothing, except her compass. We found it buried half in the dirt near a small creek that feeds into the valley. It still had her initials scratched on the back, CF, just like she'd done in middle school. But it didn't work anymore. The needle spun a little, then froze in place, like the world stopped moving in that one tiny circle. I strapped it to my wrist the day after the funeral service. No one talked about it much. Official word was lost hiker, presumed dead. But I never really bought that. Casey wasn't careless. She knew how to use a map, a compass, even stars. She wasn't the type to wander off trail just for fun. That's why when they asked me to check on this path again, the one they closed after folks started whispering about lights and creatures, I didn't say no. Even if they hadn't asked. I was coming anyway. I've never been one to believe in ghosts or monsters. I've seen real horror, war is full of it. But lately I've started to wonder if there are other kinds of horror. Ones that don't wear uniforms or carry guns. Things older than stories. Things that don't need a reason to take what they want. There's something about this forest that doesn't feel right anymore. Even the locals, the ones who've lived here for generations, they've gone quiet. No more hunting near this area. No more campfires. I stopped by a general store in Cherokee 2 days ago, and when I asked about Trail 19, the old man behind the counter just stared at me, said, "That place don't want you no more, Fitch." Didn't explain. Just turned around and walked into the back room. I've heard stories, and not official ones, about lights in the trees, footsteps without bodies, shapes too big to belong to anything normal. I didn't used to believe any of it, but then again, I didn't used to believe I could lose Casey either. Now, I'm not sure what I believe. All I know is that her compass started spinning again when I got near that ridge. Not before, not after. Just there. The needle didn't point north, it pointed up the slope, toward that circle of trees, toward the place where the bear was hung like a broken puppet. I don't know what I'm looking for anymore. Maybe answers, maybe peace, maybe her. But I do know one thing. Whatever took her, whatever's hiding in these woods, it's still here, and I'm not leaving until I face it. The deeper I went, the stranger things got. About a half-mile past the bear carcass, I found the first circle. It was made of trees, not fallen logs or cut branches, but live trees that had bent toward each other in a perfect ring, Not broken or forced, just curved as if something had told them to grow that way. Each trunk leaned just enough to form a complete loop, almost like a giant wreath, maybe 10 feet across. Inside the circle, nothing grew. No grass, no moss. Just bare dirt, smooth, not a single pebble or twig out of place. I stepped inside. The moment my boot hit the dirt, the air went cold, like walking into a fridge. My breath fogged up for a second, even though it was nearly 90 degrees outside. Stepped back out. The warmth returned. That's not normal. Nothing about this was normal. About an hour later, I found the insects. Dozens of dead ones, beetles, moths, dragonflies, all laid out on a patch of moss. Not scattered, not stepped on, placed, arranged, in clean, perfect rows like a museum display. Each one facing the same direction. No signs of decay, no ants crawling over them. It was like they'd just stopped living and waited to be found. I crouched down to get a better look. My compass twitched. The needle spun once, then froze again. Same direction as before. Up the ridge. That ridge. I kept moving, not because I wanted to, but because it felt like I had to. My body kept walking, even as my brain screamed to turn around. Time got weird after that. I don't know how else to explain it. At one point, I swear the sun jumped. 1 second it was high above the trees, then it dipped low like it was already late afternoon. I checked my watch. It was still morning. But the shadows on the ground stretched out long and thin, like they didn't care what time it really was. The air was heavier now. Breathing felt like drinking warm syrup. I started sweating more. My skin itched under my shirt, like something was crawling just beneath it. Then came the dreams. They didn't wait for sleep. I'd blink, and for a second I'd see something else. A hallway, a screaming face, a forest burning in blue fire. Then I'd blink again and I was back on the trail, heart pounding like I'd just run a mile. At first I thought I was dehydrated. I took sips from my canteen, splashed water on my face, but the images kept coming. Not like memories, like warnings. Like something was trying to show me pieces of a puzzle I wasn't ready to solve. Then I heard her voice. Dad. It was soft, fragile, coming from behind a tree just ahead of me. I froze. Casey. I stepped forward slowly, heart thudding in my chest. Casey. No. I turned the corner. Nothing there, just more trees. More fog rising from the forest floor like steam from a cracked sidewalk. I know I heard it. I know her voice. But there was no sign. That's when I noticed the footprints, right beside mine. Barefoot, small, almost like hers. Only one problem. They didn't lead anywhere. Just appeared. As if someone had been walking right beside me the whole time without making a sound. And then vanished. I felt sick, my legs were weak, my hands were shaking. I pressed them against a tree to steady myself, but the bark was soft. Too soft. I pulled my hand back. The bark peeled away like skin. Underneath? Claw marks, not deep ones. About 3 inches apart. Way too big for any normal animal. They started from the base and went 10 feet up. Like something tall had scraped its claws straight down the trunk. The bark started bleeding. I stepped back. No way. This couldn't be happening. Trees don't bleed, but the red drops hit the ground. And then I heard it again. That hum. Louder. Now, it wasn't just a sound anymore. It had weight. It pushed into my ears, made my teeth buzz. My compass began to spin slowly on my wrist, faster and faster until it became a blur. The trees swayed, even though the air was still. And for the first time in years, I was afraid, not of dying, but of what I might find if I kept going. Still I did. Because even through the fear, through the hum, the bleeding trees, the freezing circles, I felt something pulling me forward. Something wanted me to follow. Something. Or someone. I reached the ridge by mid-afternoon, though the sky said otherwise. The light had turned strange. Not dark, not bright, just dull. Like the world had been dimmed, the way a TV screen looks right before it shuts off. Colors were fading. Greens looked gray. My own hands looked pale and washed out. I stood at the base of the ridge, staring, up at a wall of trees so dense it looked like they'd grown together. No gaps, no path. But my compass needle pointed straight into it, still spinning every few seconds like it was confused, then sure again. I placed my hand on one of the trunks. The tree shivered, not from wind. There was no wind. It trembled like it knew I was coming. I pushed through the thick branches and stepped inside. Silence swallowed me. Not just quiet, total silence. Even my footsteps made no sound. The ground was soft and spongy, not moss, not dirt, something in between. The smell was different too. Not rot, not flowers, more like electricity, if that makes sense. Like the smell right before lightning hits. I kept moving. Every step I took felt heavier, like I was walking through water. The air pressed in on my chest. My ears popped. The light flickered again, like someone flipping a switch behind the sky. Then I saw it. At first I thought it was a trick of the trees. Something massive stood ahead of me, between two old trunks, half hidden by shadow. It wasn't moving, just watching. I took a slow step forward. The figure shimmered, like heat, rising off pavement, but it wasn't heat. It was bending the space around it. And then it turned its head. Two glowing eyes locked onto mine. Not red, not yellow. They swirled with color. Deep, endless, like galaxies. Looking into them made me dizzy, like I was falling through stars. The rest of the thing was hard to describe. It was shaped like a man, but larger. 7 feet, maybe 8. Shoulders wide, arms long, thick with muscle under a coat of tangled fur that didn't quite stay still, like it was breathing or twitching, or alive in a way it shouldn't be. It didn't move toward me, it didn't growl or roar, it just stood there, staring, and then my mind cracked open. I didn't see with my eyes anymore, I saw with my memories. Suddenly I was back in my living room, Casey on the couch, laughing at a dumb joke I'd made. Then I was in the hospital, holding her hand when she broke her ankle in 10th grade. Then I was in the woods again, not now, but a year ago, and I saw her walking ahead of me on this very trail. She turned. Her face was pale. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear her. Then came the scream, high, sharp, full of pain. It echoed in my skull like it came from inside me. I dropped to my knees. I clutched the compass on my wrist. The creature stepped closer. Still no sound. Not even its footsteps. It didn't bare teeth or raise claws. It simply knelt in front of me, massive and still, as if waiting. And then it reached out, slowly, and touched the compass. The metal grew warm. And for a second, I understood. It hadn't killed her. It hadn't taken her, but it had seen, and it had tried to help, in its own strange way. I felt tears in my eyes. Not fear, grief. Something bigger than me, older than me. This thing wasn't evil. It wasn't hunting. It was watching, and maybe warning. The ground shook, not violently, just enough to say, "Time's up." The creature stood, turned away, and vanished into the trees like smoke. And then the hum returned, louder than ever. The ridge began to tremble. Leaves flew up from the ground like they were being pulled by a vacuum. The air cracked, and I heard a single word inside my head. Go. I didn't run. I walked. Slowly. Shaking. I left the ridge, the trees parting around me as if they knew I was finished. And behind me, the forest closed again. No sign it had ever opened. No sign it had ever let me in. I don't remember walking back down the ridge. 1 minute I was there, surrounded by trees that had no sound. And the next, I was standing near a small stream with mud up to my ankles. My hands were dirty. My shirt was torn. The compass was gone from my wrist, but I wasn't panicked. I just stood there, chest rising and falling like I'd finished a long hike. Then I saw the trail. It was glowing, faint, like moonlight trapped in the dirt. A thin line of soft light stretched between the trees, weaving slowly through the woods like a thread left behind. It pulsed gently, calling me. I followed. Step by step, I moved without thinking. The forest had gone quiet again, but not in a scary way. It felt more like walking through a church after everyone's gone home. Just me, and something watching kindly from the shadows. The trail led to a clearing I'd never seen before. A ring of rocks, each one covered in carvings, symbols I didn't know but somehow felt familiar. They weren't letters, but they meant something. I felt it in my bones. In the center of the clearing there was a hole, a cave mouth hidden beneath a curtain of moss and vines. The glow stopped right at the edge of it. My hands were shaking again. Every part of me wanted to turn around, but I dropped to my knees and crawled inside. The cave was narrow. I scraped my elbows, my shoulders. The air smelled like wet earth and copper. The glow followed me just enough to see by. Walls pulsed slightly as if alive. I don't know how far I went, but eventually the tunnel opened up. It was wide, tall, like a hidden cathedral underground. And that's where I saw it. Casey's. Pack torn muddy, one strap ripped clean through. It sat near a rock like someone had placed it there on purpose. Beside it were her hiking boots, still tied. My throat tightened. I walked to the pack and dropped to my knees. My fingers ran over the fabric. It was hers. I unzipped it. Waterlogged. Maps, her old journal. A granola bar so stale it crumbled in my hand. And then from the shadows, it stepped out again. The creature. It didn't shimmer this time, didn't hide. It just stood there, tall and still. The same swirling galaxies in its eyes. But this time it was holding something. My compass. Casey's compass. The strap was fixed, the metal polished clean. The needle spun once, then locked. Into place. North. It walked toward me. Slow, steady, like it had all the time in the world. I didn't move. It held out the compass. I took it, and the moment my fingers touched the cold metal, something changed. A rush of memories hit me again, but not mine this time. Hers, Casey's. She'd wandered off trail, chasing light through the trees. Not fireflies, something brighter, something alive. She'd fallen, hit her head, crawled. For days, confused. And then, it found her. It didn't hurt her. It stayed with her. Watched her. Tried to help. But the forest took its toll. She passed away in her sleep. Somewhere deep inside, far from anyone who could find her. It had carried her things here. It remembered her. The glow in the cave began to fade. The creature stepped back. I didn't speak. I don't think I could have. The ground rumbled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The cave was collapsing. I turned and ran, crawled back through the tunnel, scraping my hands raw, lungs burning. The light vanished behind me. When I pulled myself out, the moss-covered entrance was gone. I stood in the clearing, heart pounding, hands bleeding. Compass clutched in my fist, and then it started to rain. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, the sky opened, and warm drops fell through the trees like a blessing. I followed the stream downhill until I found a ranger truck parked on a service road. A man inside jumped out, said he'd been looking for me all day, said I was 2 miles from where I was supposed to be, said they'd already called in a missing persons report. Didn't know what to say. I just held up the compass. They brought me back to the station, patched me up, and asked 100 questions. I didn't answer most of them. A week later, I got the call. They'd found a body, female, young, found in Oregon. Hiker had stumbled across it, wrapped in a poncho under a dead tree. DNA confirmed it. It was Casey. The sheriff said the timeline didn't make sense, said her ID showed signs of being placed recently, said her boots were clean, said her journal was still dry, said it was like she'd only died days ago. But I knew better. I knew what I saw. I still wear the compass. It works now. Always points true. But sometimes, late at night, when I hold it up and close my eyes, I feel it tug, just a little. Not north, but toward the trees, toward the ridge, and I wonder if it's still watching, if it still remembers. If one day, when I'm ready, it'll let me back in.